Hello, everybody. Thank you for jumping on. It is now 2 o'clock Eastern, so I'm going to go ahead and start off this webinar. My name is Mike Magee, and I just wanted to take a second to say thank you for joining today. I'm looking at the attendee list, and there's a lot of people that I recognize and a lot of people that come on these every month. So I appreciate your support in joining these every month. We do these every single month, usually the third Thursday of the month, which is only the 16th, but it's already the third Thursday. So thanks for joining. I know you're busy, but thanks for being here. Today, we're talking about a topic that historically didn't have a lot of technology in it, but that's changed. And we're going to be talking about the advancements that we've done for the K2 population, specifically with the Avior and the Orion 3, and how that works for this patient population. Hope you're looking forward to it, and I am going to go ahead and get started. Go ahead and go to the next slide there, Caleb. As always, if you've been on these before, you know this, but all the participants are on mute, and that just keeps the background noise a little bit better, or down a little bit, I guess, and it is being recorded. You can find this webinar and all of our past webinars on our Blatchford Institute YouTube page. We can watch them, of course, but you can't watch them for credits on YouTube, but you can, however, of course, get credits for this. It is 1.25 credits. And that is a great question, Julia. She's already asked a question. If these are business or scientific, I'm 99% sure it's a scientific credit. I will find that out while I am on this webinar and hopefully have an answer for you by the end. Which brings up the next point. You can ask questions. There is a Q&A panel. Feel free to ask questions away, and I will either answer live like I just did, or I will type in a specific answer for that particular person if it's needed. Well, they're giving business categories. Okay, well, I will talk to ABC about that and find out what's going on there. Thank you for that. There is a quiz, and that quiz is going to be on the last slide. It's a QR code, so if you're watching on your phone, don't worry. I will be sending out a link to that quiz after the webinar and just in a follow-up email. So you can be looking for that for the quiz, but you do have to complete the quiz before you can do the, or before you get credits. And you can always register for future webinars on our website on the training and education page. So without further ado, next slide, Caleb. Like I said, my name is Mike Magee. I'm the Global Education Manager and Senior Prosthetist for Blatchford. That's my email address, and that is my QR code. You can scan that. That's got my contact information. You can always text me or call me if you have any further questions or need any support of any kind. Happy to help. We've got Caleb on the line. He's going to be doing the bulk of the presentation. So Caleb, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. As Mike mentioned, my name is Caleb Rhynard. I'm a CPO and Regional Clinical Specialist with Blatchford. I've been with Blatchford about 2 years now. We're coming right up on it. And I cover primarily the Midwest anymore. But yeah, happy to be here today and excited to talk about some K2 solutions for individuals with lower limb loss.
Thanks, Caleb. Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and go on to the next slide, and I'm going to let Caleb take over, and I'm going to chime back in towards the end with a few last thoughts and talk about what to do next. So go ahead, Caleb.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. So we'll get started here. And so today we're hoping to discuss kind of Blatchford's K2 portfolio and how that portfolio can benefit individuals with lower limb amputations who fall into that K2 category. We're going to learn about each product that's in that portfolio and how they're unique and how they're ideal for your next K2 patient. And then we'll also touch on how to fit, align, and code each and fine-tune each product in that portfolio. So that portfolio consists of a few different feet and a few different knees. Excuse me. So today we're going to be discussing the Navigator and the Avalon. Those are the 2 feet we'll be going through. And then 3 different knees to go through: the BMK2, the Avior, and the Orion 3. At the end, we'll have a quick summary. But with that being said, let's get into some feet. First and foremost, before we talk about the features of the Navigator and the Avalon, what do we know about the biomechanics of K2 gait, or individuals who fall into that K2 category and how they ambulate? We know that they walk with a reduced walking speed of about 10%. They generate about 17% less ankle power in later portions of stance phase, and they tend to take shorter stride lengths by about 11%. So with that being said, you want a foot that's going to kind of accommodate and work with those kind of changes in your typical gait mechanics. So going into the Navigator is obviously a K2 foot, but it has a multi-axial design with a ball and snubber integrated within. It's an anatomical ankle position that kind of sits a little bit lower, so it falls in line with where the ankle position typically would be. And then you have the ability to adjust that foot stiffness with that ball and snubber combination to work properly for your patient. The weight limit comes in at 275 pounds. You have a size range of 22 to 30 centimeters, and then it's a very low build height and very lightweight. I've actually been utilizing the Navigator quite a lot lately, and actually had it on a K3 patient just the other day, and he was pleasantly surprised with how well it moved. Even though he's very much a K3 ambulator, we had to use it just for build height reasons. But after the demo, he was like, I'm actually really impressed with how that foot ambulates. So just always keep it in mind as an option. It's a great foot, low profile, has a really good functionality to it. This is just kind of showing you the makeup of what provides that functionality through the Navigator. So you got that ball and snubber that we talked about. And again, those stiffnesses of each, the ball and the snubber, can be adjusted for patient weight and category. Your bilateral patients may require a slightly stiffer snubber, and your trans-fem patients may require a slightly softer ball just for increased stability. But you can fine-tune those and change those out to accommodate and optimize it for your patient. And then another thing I like to point out is that keel. You'll see a similar keel when we get to the Avalon here in a second, but that keel is designed purposely to match those, to optimize it to work for those gait mechanics that we touched on earlier with that shorter stride length, and it got an optimal kind of rollover to it. So it allows that rollover to occur for those users as they're taking those shorter step lengths and with that reduction in ankle power. When it comes to aligning the Navigator, you're going to drop your laser line or your plumb line from the socket, bisecting it, and you're going to hopefully you'll keep that pylon vertical if possible, accommodate any sort of flexion that is in the socket, and then you want that weight line to pass through the center of the pyramid or about between the first and second third of the foot there. And then you would obviously do your static alignment and make sure you have equal foot loading between both. Then when it comes to L codes, it's a 5972 and a 5986. That is a PDAC approved foot. And again, great motion through that multi-axial rotation unit that's built into the ankle of that foot. So next up, we'll talk about the Avalon. The Avalon is a K2 foot as well, obviously, but it kind of takes the range of motion to a little bit of a step further compared to the Navigator, because now we are introducing a hydraulic unit to the foot. But again, you'll see that keel looks familiar to the Navigator as well. I will mention we do have an Avalon K2 vac as well as an option if you're utilizing vacuum for those K2 users. I'm primarily just talking about the general functionality of the Avalon foot in general, but just keep in mind that we do have that Avalon K2 vac as an option if you're going to utilize vacuum. Not everybody does for the K2 population, but it's there if you need to. So again, that Avalon K2 is designed for those K2 gait mechanics that we touched on earlier. With that, that keel length and shape is optimized for consistent and efficient rollover. Again, thinking of those kind of reduction in step length, that keel is going to allow for that rollover to happen. Yeah, and then you have that hydraulic ankle that sits on top of it that's going to allow for and provide resistance to plantar flexion and dorsiflexion. That's going to give improved confidence, safety, and independence to the user, because at like initial contact, you're going to get great plantar flexion for foot flat and improved safety, and then easy rollover up onto the toe into dorsiflexion. Then through terminal stance into swing phase, you're going to have that foot stay in that dorsiflex state, which is going to give them improved range of motion and toe clearance throughout swing phase. So a few benefits to Avalon is alignment and efficient rollover. So not only are you going to get the rollover from that keel, but the range of motion from the ankle unit itself, it's also going to adapt to the terrain. So if a user is going up or down an ADA ramp or any sort of slope in the parking lot, those hydraulics are going to help eat that up and allow for a smoother gait pattern throughout that variable terrain. We talked about the keel shape already, but again, that's going to allow for that smooth rollover. And then that range of motion not only helps them when they're ambulating, it's also going to allow for easier sit to stand because they're able to pull that foot up underneath them, get it underneath their base of support a little bit easier, and then propel themselves up versus having to fight a foot at 90 degrees. We touched on it already, but that increased toe clearance is going to reduce the risk of trips and falls because that foot's going to stay in that dorsiflex state. And then increased shock absorption and stability with those hydraulics introduced into this foot. And it is a waterproof design with a sandal toe foot shell for an option. So for the range of motion of Avalon, you're going to see 12 degrees of range of motion, 6 degrees in plantar flexion, and as well as 6 degrees in dorsiflexion. It's a single valve adjustment, so you can see on the back of the foot there with the 2.5 millimeter Allen, you can make that change, and that's going to control both dorsiflexion and plantar flexion together. And then the weight limit is 330 pounds. So going back into that sit to stand safety, that dorsiflexion is super useful with them being able to pull those feet underneath them and get them underneath of their base of support, allowing them to stand in an easier fashion. So being able to do that, you'll see in the bottom right there, allows them to reduce their peak hip moment by 33%. So you're taking a third of that requirement away, making it easy for them to rise from a seated position. And one thing to note is sit to stand is one of the biggest factors for allowing individuals to maintain their independence. So if we can allow individuals to continue to go from a seated position into a standing position in an easier fashion, then we can allow them to continue to maintain their independence without having to get some sort of aid, going to a skilled nursing facility or something like that. So a little bit of data and some studies behind the Avalon is you'll see some data points here on the left-hand side, but then you can also find on our website, or we can email it over to you if you'd like, a study specifically on Avalon K2 and kind of the benefits that it provides for that K2 population. So you'll see 34% reduction in stance phase asymmetry with Avalon, so more symmetrical gait pattern throughout stance phase. You're going to see an increase in PEQ domain scores compared to their non-hydraulic feet, and then an increase in the mean walking speed during a 6-minute walk test. So users are actually walking faster with a faster self-selected walking speed versus compared to their previous foot. And that's because of that hydraulic ankle technology combined with that ergonomic keel shape to allow for that optimal functionality for those shorter step lengths. So when it comes to aligning the Avalon, you're going to do a bench alignment, and if you're familiar with Blatchford hydraulic ankles at all, you're going to notice that this wedge, and you're going to recognize that, and you're going to utilize that wedge to give you a stable starting point for your bench alignment. You're going to assemble the prosthesis, put the foot inside the shoe, and then you're going to put the shoe on the wedge, fully plantar flex the ankle, and have the heel of that shoe be at the thick portion of that wedge. What that's going to do is kind of eat up that 6 degrees of range of motion in plantar flexion and give you kind of a stable starting point for your bench alignment. That way you're not having to guess where the kind of middle range is throughout that range of motion. You're going to shoot for a vertical pylon again, accommodate any flexion within your socket, and then you're going to drop your laser line or plumb line, and you're shooting for it to aim between the 2 pivot points that's down on the foot there. So you can see that zoomed in portion on the bottom right-hand side has those 2 pivot points. You're looking for that weight line to fall within there. So about a 1 centimeter range for it to fall within. Then you do a static alignment, make sure they don't feel like they're falling forwards or backwards. And then you'd go into dynamic gate from there, making minor changes as needed. Coding for the Avalon, you're going to have 5972. That is your flexible keel code, and then 5968 is going to go on top of that for your multi-axial swing phase active dorsiflexion feature. So that's the feet section of the presentation. Next, we're going to go into knees, and that's where we're going to talk about the BMK2, and then we'll go into the technology products with Avior and the Orion. So first, we'll go into BMK2. BMK2 is a nice, lightweight, and compact mechanical knee option for users who they just need a durable option that doesn't take a lot of servicing. They don't have the coverage for a microprocessor or something along those lines. The BMK2 is going to offer kind of a weight-activated design and system so that when they land on it, that weight is going to stabilize the knee, giving them good stability, but then they're going to still be allowed to come through swing phase with knee flexion. And that's going to, the way that functions is kind of like, I have an image here in a second, but it functions kind of like a drum brake. So when they land on it, that's going to push out, give them the stability, but it's also designed with kind of a cam feature. So your typical weight activated knee, you have to completely unweight before you get any sort of flexion. But with this cam design, you end up actually being able to kind of start to initiate that flexion without full weight being removed from the prosthetic knee. There's also adjustable stance flexion and extension assist spring available with the knee. And I already mentioned it, but it's durable and field serviceable as needed. A couple of specs there on the right-hand side. I'm not going to go through all of those, but max user weight is 275. It has a rotating male pyramid on the top, which is super nice, keeping your component selection down there. And once you tighten down the set screws on that pyramid, it's going to lock into place for you. So here's your alignment. You're going to drop your plumb line from the trochanter, bisecting the socket, accommodating any sort of flexion, and you're shooting for right through the knee pivot center, as you see in the middle of the screen there, or up to 5 millimeters in front of, making sure that you're accommodating for your shoe heel height down at the foot. And then you're going to follow any sort of foot alignment recommendations from whatever foot it is that you choose to use for that user. Your L codes for the BMK2 are 5812, 5845, and then that 5850 for that knee extension assist. Again, a super lightweight, compact knee. That's a great mechanical option for a user that needs that stance security, but then the freedom of swing phase flexion. So next, we're going to transition into Avior, and Avior is our latest microprocessor product, and it comes with Smart Step, which is a digital-based platform that's going to be used for programming, as well as has a few tools at your disposal to utilize for troubleshooting, optimization, those kind of things. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on Smart Step, but we've done a few webinars on that, and we're always happy to talk about it. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. But with Avior as the knee, it is designed for those lower level K2 ambulators and primary patients, as they say in the UK. But before we go into the fine details of it, I want to discuss some of the LCD changes. I'm sure majority of you are familiar with this, but it never hurts to reiterate it. But if you aren't familiar, the LCD extended coverage, the changes extended coverage for changes to, microprocessor knees for that lower level K2 users. So just so you can see here, I have up on the screen the kind of the previous requirements set in the LCD, but they have to have clinical evaluation to determine their functional level. That hasn't changed at all. And then there needs to be supporting documentation within the medical records that kind of give the rationale as to why this knee was selected. And furthermore, within that, it needs to have features to it that improves the beneficiary's functional health outcomes, such as reduction in fall, injury prevention, and lower energy expenditure. And then it should also help the beneficiary accomplish their activities of daily living. And then lastly, lower level knee systems have been considered and ruled out for typically the reasons up above. All of that is the same. What's really changed is this additional criteria here, and all of these must be met. So the electronic microprocessor knee is indicated for functional level K2. It has integrated technology that allows the knee to detect when a user trips or stumbles and can automatically adjust to stabilize the knee, such as stumble recovery. And then 3 and 4, I kind of lump into one, but the beneficiary is able to make use of the product by charging it daily. And then they're also able to respond to alerts and errors. I like to point out 3 and 4 because I've had actually 2 different clinicians now tell me that they've received denials on microprocessor knees, specifically because they forgot to indicate that. So just making sure that you're indicating that, hey, this user can charge it, can respond to alerts and errors. And a great example that we all have sitting in our pocket is a cell phone. If a user has a cell phone, they are able to charge it and respond to alerts and errors on that, then they can likely utilize the functionality and respond to alerts and errors on a microprocessor knee as well. Why microprocessor? I think you guys all understand the benefits of microprocessors. The one thing I like to note here is that we haven't always been able to provide microprocessors to those lower level K2 users. And I think it's an exciting time in our industry where that's changing. And being able to be out there and get Avior into the field and demonstrate this with several people over the last few months has been really eye-opening. It's really great to see that change is happening within our industry, because quite frankly, that patient population is probably going to benefit from this technology more because they just don't have the same response time, endurance, and strength that those higher end users have. So it's super fun to watch this technology start to be opened up into that K2 realm. Kind of piggybacking on that is the problem with historically with K2 knees and mechanical knees in a whole is there's no yielding and there's no safety. So that's been the biggest holdup with mechanical knees is there's benefits to them for sure, but there's also tends to be some cons. The main thing being they can't go downstairs with any sort of yielding resistance. There's no sitting resistance when they go into stand to sit. They have no resistance or yielding effect being able to ambulate on a slope. And then if there was a stumble or swing phase was interrupted, there is no safety in there, and they likely are going to end up on the floor because that knee is just going to swing back behind them. The other thing that's not mentioned there is gait abnormalities. Most of the mechanical knees in the K2 realm that offer some sort of stability, whether it's manual locking or weight activated, tend to come with some sort of gait abnormality because you have to kind of accommodate for the functionality that they provide. But now with the LCD changes and the technology that is coming out into the K2 world, they get the ability to have all of that safety kind of built into the system, but then you can also give them a lot of that freedom and safety, resistance, the yielded resistance into sitting, or stumble control if they're in lock free or yield free. You kind of get the best of both worlds. So with Avior, you get the ability to kind of set it up in 3 different configurations, which you're seeing there in the middle of the screen, which is lock, lock free, and yield free. You can think of lock as kind of a manual locking knee. When they stand up, it's going to be locked through stance and swing. They're going to have maximum security from that. And then as they progress and you're ready to give them a little bit more independence, you can go to lock free. That's going to function more like a weight activated knee, giving them stability and stance, but then that knee is going to break and go into flexion for swing phase. And then lastly, you're going to have that yield free, which is going to function like a standard microprocessor as you know it. They're going to have yielded resistance and stance, and then free swing during swing phase. The nice thing here is that you can change through different configurations up or down depending on what's going on within the patient. Historically, in the K2 population, when you provided a knee, you were stuck with that knee for a few years until there was a functional change and you were ready to move on. But with Avior, you'll have the ability to kind of change as they progress, whether that's 2 weeks or 2 years from now. A couple other things within Avior is the ability to sit down in any of the configurations. So even in lock, when they're up and moving around, it's going to be locked. But they hit the sitting parameters, they're going to be able to sit down with that yielded resistance into a chair. And then you can implement stance flexion into any of the three features or three configurations as well. So even in lock, great security, but you can give them 0, 5, or 10 degrees of stance flexion to give them a little bit of shock absorption and dampen that ride just a bit. Here's just your indications and contraindications. Indications, you're going to have a weight limit of 275 pounds. So they do have to be below that. If they go above that, then that would be contraindicated. This is indicated for your kind of high K1 to low K3 activity range at the discretion of the clinician. And then it is suitable for users, going back to that LCD, who has the ability to charge it and respond to alerts and errors, obviously. It's indicated for unilateral or bilateral transplant patients. We've recently opened up the door to bilateral use. We've done some fittings on that, and it's gone really well. So both are available as options at this point. As far as contraindications go, it's going to be kind of the opposites of everything we just touched. If they can't respond to alerts and errors, if their activity level 3 or 4, or they weigh over 275 pounds, they would not be indicated for this knee. This video is going to show you the functionality of the knee and kind of the design. So you'll notice as this knee flexes, it's actually going, that kind of tibial shell portion is going to actually translate in the posterior direction. That gives it a polycentric aspect to the knee, and that comes with a whole number of benefits for the user. So the first benefit is just being that it is polycentric. It's going to be a little bit more, provide more inherent stability and a little easier activation in swing phase or flexion, just because that ICOR is slightly posterior and proximal compared to the pivot point. And then as the knee flexes, you'll notice that that chassis kind of moves posteriorly. That's going to provide kind of a proximally directed force as the user sits down, kind of give them some support up against their residual limb versus it kind of getting pulled away from them that you tend to see in a single axis knee. Another benefit is going into flexion. So sitting down into a chair, because of that polycentric design, we can provide support up to 110 degrees. So that's 20 additional degrees, because you typically see that drop off at 90 degrees in a single axis knee. And then lastly is going downstairs. We've noticed that people can actually leave more of their foot on the landing of the stair as they're descending stairs step over step, which is a huge benefit when it comes time to teach a K2 user to descend a flight of stairs. Even if it's only 2 or 3 to get out of their house, the ability to leave majority of their foot on the landing of that stair versus having to shoot for half is going to give them much more stability and confidence as they're learning to go down those stairs. You have enhanced yield that comes with Avior. What that means is it's going to allow for the knee to provide more yielding resistance as the knee goes through flexion range of motion. So when a user first sits down, you're going to have a resistance, and then as that knee goes through the flexion range of motion, so from 0 to 20 and 20 to 40, that resistance is going to start to climb up and giving them more support as they sit into the chair and get deeper into flexion. What that provides is a very smooth, consistent feeling from the beginning of flexion all the way down into the chair. You'll notice here that there is good support up to 110 degrees, so you get that additional 20 degrees. And then on the right is that programming screen. When you're programming in the knee, you have the ability to adjust that initial and ending resistance independently. So that's going to give you the ability to provide the resistance needed at both the beginning and the end and fine tune it to the user. You don't just have one single resistance that has to work for them. And you'll notice on the graph, the 2 different lines, the differential between those 2 numbers is going to affect that yield rate. So the bigger the difference, the more aggressive that ramping effect is going to be as they go into flexion. So here, this is going to demonstrate both stand to sit and then also sit to stand. So June's going to sit into this chair. You're going to see her riding that resistance, and she's going to actually stand up halfway. And then you're going to see her kind of lean into that prosthesis. And that's going to show you the ratcheting effect that happens with the knee. But if she then commits to sitting back into the chair, it actually aborts out of that ratchet feature and provides her sitting resistance back into the chair in a safe manner. So that ratchet feature kind of functions like a ratchet lock. As the user starts to stand and that thigh reaches about 45 degrees, it's then going to block flexion, giving them the ability to kind of rely on that prosthesis all the way up to 0 degrees until they get fully standing. Unless they abort out of that by sitting back into that chair, it's then going to lower them back safely. There's one other thing I was going to mention. It'll come to me in a second. Just show that one more time. Oh, yeah. So I see this the most when users go from sit to stand and they use a walker. So they typically will use the armrest to kind of press up out of their chair, and then they get halfway standing up. Well, at that point, they need to be able to move their body weight anteriorly to reach for their walker. And typically, they're at a point where that's blocking flexion, and they can now rely on putting some weight into that leg as they move that body weight forward without it kind of melting into flexion when they don't want it to. So they can utilize that support as they go and finish standing vertically. Another unique feature to Avior is dynamic slope and stairs descent. So you can actually independently adjust slopes and stairs separate to their sitting resistance for the user. So if you have a user who likes their sitting resistance, but they're going downstairs and they feel like it's way too soft or way too stiff, you can go in and independently adjust that, and it's not going to affect their sitting resistance. So I did a fitting on an individual a couple months ago, and he liked to sit down relatively quickly. So we fine-tuned his sitting resistance appropriately, and then we went outside and started to go down slopes. Well, he liked a lot of support and security when he went down slopes. It made him feel confident and in control, and he just liked that kind of slow response. So we ramped up his resistance outside. He could descend the slopes in a nice controlled fashion, just like he liked. And then we went inside and he activated the sitting resistance and sat down in a quick fashion, just like he prefers. So it's nice being able to utilize both resistances independently, and you don't just have to find one that meets in the middle for both. There's also a wheelchair mode within the knee. So when a user sits down from a seated position, if they extend the knee between 10 and 45 degrees and hold it briefly, it's going to beep unless silent mode is activated, but it'll beep to activate or to let them know that this is activated, and it'll then stay in an extended position so they can wheel about without it kind of getting caught underneath them or having to hold it up. And to deactivate it, it takes a side load just like that, or a slight extension to come back out of it. I don't know how many K2 patients I had when I was in practice who would either have to hold their leg up with their hands or their contralateral side to keep it out of their way when they were in their wheelchair, or some of them would just completely take their leg off entirely. So this is a nice feature to kind of keep that foot up and out of the way so that they don't have to worry about it quite so much. There's peace of mind built into the knee. So you have an IP rating of IP65, so they can be around watery environments and know that it's not going to destroy the device. And this is also a patient population where incontinence could occur. So if that was to happen, you could then take the device into the shower, hose it down. It's protected against that. There's also good battery life built into the device. So you have 2 days of normal use, and it takes 5 hours to fully charge it from completely depleted. There's an on-off switch, so you can actually extend that life even more. If a user is just going to sit down for a while and not utilize the leg, you could turn it off to extend that battery life. And then the charger, where it goes into the wall, actually the cord disconnects with a USB-A, so you could then plug that into a mobile power bank or a car charger or something like that and get some juice on the go if needed. For your bench alignment on Avior, you're going to bisect the socket at ischial level, accommodating any flexion as usual. And then you're going to drop your laser line or plumb line down, and you're going to shoot for the weight line to fall through that proximal pivot point or up to 10 millimeters in front of. And then you're going to follow whatever foot recommendations you have for the foot that you're utilizing. Obviously in this photo, we're utilizing an Avalon, so you've got the wedge and full plantar flexion built in. And then you're going to torque the distal tube clamp to 15 Newton meters. And the distal tube clamp accommodates a 30 mil pylon, just a standard pylon. It's not oversized or anything like that. So standard pylon there, but you do want to torque that to 15 Newton meters so it gets an accurate read. And then that last bullet point there is in the programming, it will remind you of this, but you're going to do a flexion check just to make sure the socket isn't making contact with the chassis of the knee. For your L codes here, they're going to be your standard L codes that you're used to kind of across the board for any microprocessor knee, minus that last one. So that 5615 is going to come in and replace 5828, and that's going to be that polycentric code. And that comes in and reimburses, depending on your jurisdiction, an additional $3,000 to $4,000 more than 5828. So you get a little bit of extra reimbursement there as well. And those codes are PDAC approved as well. So now we'll slide into Orion 3 and kind of talk about the features that are there. And the reason Orion 3 is in this K2 Solutions presentation is what happens if you have a patient who is K2 right now, but you suspect that they're going to very quickly progress and be at a K3 functional level in very short order. Can you still provide a microprocessor knee that matches where they are now and gives them the safety that they need, but has the ability to progress as they advance? And the answer is yes. And we're going to talk about the features of Orion 3 and why that's there. But you can fine tune the settings on Orion 3 to match a true K2 user while still giving them optimal safety without sort of bending any of the rules with the LCD changes or anything like that. And then as they progress and they transform into that K3 user, you can then go in and change the settings to allow it to function at that kind of K3 function level as well. So going back to the LCD change, this bullet point here is pulled from that. But if you remember, one of those was to improve beneficiaries' functional health outcomes, such as fall reduction, injury prevention, and lower energy expenditure. And does the Orion 3 qualify? Yes. You can actually utilize the OASIS study to kind of reference that, where it showed that the Orion 3 was one of the knees that was statistically significant at reducing injurious falls with TransFem users. And then that second bullet point was, does it have functions that allow it, that benefit the user for accomplishing their activities of daily living? And it does. It has standing support, and that is going to engage in full extension as well as slight flexion. So allowing them to stand at the counter without, or brushing their teeth, doing dishes, whatever the case is, and they can utilize that standing support without having to fully activate their muscles in order to just stand there comfortably. And then secondly is yield rate. Very similar to the yield rate that we just discussed with Avior, it also is integrated in Orion 3, where as the user sits down, that ramping effect is going to occur, and they're going to get more support in the later stages of flexion, so that range of motion and the support throughout that feels very consistent and smooth. That's going to provide an easier stand to sit. It's going to allow them to traverse hills and ramps easier, and then it's going to give them improved safety on stairs or curbs. So then we have that additional criteria for K2 specifically. So we kind of went through all of these, but again, is it indicated for functional level K2? The answer is yes. So this is actually pulled from the original IFU from when the Orion came out back in 2010. So it's always been built in there. This wasn't something that we've added just recently when these LCD changes occurred, but you can see that it's always been indicated for functional level K2 to K4. So we've checked that box. Next up is, does it have technology integrated to assist in trips or stumbles to essentially provide stumble recovery? Orion 3 does have that built in. And so as the user has an interruption in swing phase, it's going to automatically go to a high yield resistance and give them the ability to recover that fall. And then as they land on it, and if it continues to fall into flexion, that yield rate is going to still occur, giving them more support as flexion continues to occur, giving them more of an ability to recover and hopefully keep themselves vertical. So we've checked both of those. And then lastly are those number 3 and number 4, which we've kind of touched on already, is can the user charge it daily, and can they respond to alerts and errors as necessary? And again, I think a cell phone in someone's pocket is a great example of that. If they're able to charge that, utilize it, and respond to alerts and errors, that kind of demonstrates that. So your features of Orion 3 is constantly monitoring in real time. It's going to vary resistance constantly to adjust and assist the user. The swing phase on Orion 3 and Lynx, for that matter, utilizes a unique pneumatic chamber. So you're actually getting stance phase stability through hydraulics and then swing phase assist through pneumatics, which provides a very smooth extension assist. And when you get into that K3, K4 window, you can actually get variable extension assist through those pneumatics. And we're going to talk about it in just a second, but in the K2 kind of window, you're going to have a single speed extension assist built in because at that point they are a single speed ambulator. Easy programming is all app-based and under 2 minutes, takes less than a dozen steps to complete, and it is protected against water as well at an IP rating of IP55. So your specific programming for the K2 users, you'll see some screenshots here of the programming app, but you can go in and you can set the walking speed for the user for either single speed or multi-speed. So if you have a K2 user who's going to be utilizing the knee, but you think they're going to progress, then you can set them up as a single speed user, have them get used to that, walking in a single speed fashion. And then when they're ready and they start going into multi-speed or variable cadence, you can then go in and change that. And we'll talk about it here in a second, but that's going to change the pneumatics, giving them the ability to have varying extension assist through that. So a couple other features here on the left is that swing phase that we just kind of touched on, but you can set that up to be a single speed ambulator or multi-speed if they're in that K3 window. Another feature that you can do is you can change the stance reselect time. You can adjust that to kind of open up the window in which the release parameters are met. And I've seen this work a number of times and kind of completely change an individual's gait. I've had several calls or been in demos where a user's walking, but they just walk a little bit more deliberately and they're not getting the knee to release. Well, we go in and we hit that stance reselect time. That opens that window up just a little bit longer to allow them to hit that release parameter, and boom, the knee starts to release every single step. So a very nice feature that you can have, especially for those K2 users if they're kind of walking a little bit more in a deliberate fashion. You have that progressive resistance yield that we've touched on, but you can change that. You're not just set with what it's at. You can go in and adjust that yield rate to give them more or less support as needed, or kind of how aggressive that ramping effect occurs. You can manipulate that. And then you've got a few different modes: cycling mode, flexion lock mode, and training mode. I'm going to talk about training mode in just a second, but that is specifically there for training, and which would come in handy for your K2 users as they're learning how to ambulate, focusing on gait mechanics, as well as preparing for learning how to descend stairs. So a couple features here is that supported yield. So as the user sits down into the chair, you're going to notice that that kind of bubble starts out orange or yellow and then starts to evolve into a red. That's showing that that resistance is climbing as they're going through the flexion range of motion. Again, giving them nice, good, consistent support as they go through from the beginning to the end stage. Adaptive speed control. So if and when your user does transform into that K3 window, you can see here as the user changes his gait speeds, he's got smooth symmetrical gait pattern throughout. And that's that extension assist taking over and making changes to the pneumatics to allow for more or less extension assist depending on the speed that they're ambulating. Kind of think of it as like the transmission to a car. So you got 5 different speeds, 3 of which you can affect, and then there's speeds in between, slow, medium, and fast. That's going to kind of help feather that in, so it's a nice, smooth, consistent change from one to the other. Training mode, we touched on this a little bit, but you enable it within the programming, and then the user can activate it through the button on the back of the device. And that's what that's going to do is take away standing support, and then you can also make it be a single speed pneumatic function to set them at a single speed. So then if they're ambulating on a treadmill or doing gait training at PT, They're just focusing on what they're doing in their gait mechanics, not necessarily what's happening within the knee. And then the standing mode being disabled, that's going to allow them the ability to learn how to descend stairs without that activating accidentally or prematurely. They can just focus on getting the gait mechanics necessary to start to descend steps without that accidentally kicking on. For your alignment on the Orion, again, you're going to bisect the socket as usual, accommodating any sort of flexion. Then you're going to drop your line. On the side of the Orion, on both sides actually, you have a little trigger, and then you have some mini hash marks in front of it. So you're going to drop your line, and you want to be at of or in front of the trigger, up to 10 millimeters in front of, depending on the stability required from your patient. If you have a newer user who needs more security, then you would have that weight line be a little bit further towards that 10 millimeter portion. If you have a very active user, then you can kind of cheat it towards the trigger a little bit more. And then you would follow any sort of alignment recommendations from whatever foot it is you choose to use. And then your L codes, the Orion is PDAC approved. It's going to be your standard L codes that you're used to across the board. Similar to Avior, except 5828 is going to come in instead of 5815. That's all I've got. So I think Mike was going to jump back in, but we had a few offerings on the website. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about the evidence and that kind of stuff. So I wanted to just mention some of the offerings that we have on our website. We have our white papers that are listed there on the bottom right. They're really good, clear, well-written the white papers to discuss 3 different main topics. We've got a microprocessor knee one, we've got a residual limb health one, and we've got a hydraulic ankle one. So they're really well written. They're great to hand out to physical therapists or physicians, or to be able to include in some documentation you might need. We've got a clinical compendium there, and that's regarding all hydraulic ankles. That's all the studies that are out about hydraulic ankle, whether they be Blatchford studies or independent studies. It's really really interesting. You can look across the top and find out which outcome you're looking for and figure out which of those studies correspond to that particular outcome. So it's really helpful. Our website's got a lot of resources, and then we also have our virtual education platform, and that can be found at blatchfordinstituteus.com. That's our online portal. It's got lots of different courses you can take that will give you credits for each one of them, of course, and broken down by products. We have a lot of information there. So go ahead and go to the next slide. Again, I just wanted to thank you for being here. Don't forget to complete the quiz. That's going to be on the next slide. You can go to that, Caleb. And again, my name is Mike Magee. Caleb was doing the bulk of this presentation. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it helpful. If you would like to do an Avior, please, or an Orion, or really any of our products, reach out to our territory managers. You can respond to the email that I send out in a little while about with this quiz. You can respond to that if you need help with if you don't know who your territory manager is or something like that. We're happy to help however we can. So just send me an email, and I'm happy to get somebody in touch with you. So if you want to do, like I said, if you want to do an Orion or an Avior demo, we can do those. We can send one along with one of our clinical team members like Caleb out to help out. So thanks for joining. Take the quiz. We'll stay on and answer any questions you might have while you're taking the quiz. Not about the quiz, but while you're taking the quiz. Yeah, so if you have, does anybody have any questions, you can type them there in the Q&A panel. I've been watching that. Haven't seen many questions yet. I have reached out to ABC about, there was a comment about whether we're getting business or scientific credits. I have reached out to ABC to find out if I can get some answers on that, and I will let you know the answer to that. Any other questions? I'll just stay on for a couple of minutes. And of course, when you're done with a quiz, you can drop off if you don't have any further questions. But thank you for joining. Well, thank you all. I don't see any more questions coming in, so that does it for today, and I look forward to seeing you next month on our next webinar. So stay tuned for the topic, and I hope you will join us. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.